the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. North Dakota State and South Dakota State meeting up for the Dakota marker today. You guys, this is a date that we didn't necessarily want to be playing on. April 17th left open by the Missouri Valley, but sure glad that we're capable of having this game, that this game in particular was open on the schedule. Joined by Kyle Emanuel, Devin Fry here. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, we really are. And like you said, Beth, I think it was smart of the Valley to kind of look at, or the FCS in general, look at the season and say, hey, there's probably going to be a game or two that need to be canceled. This game obviously has huge implications, and no one could have really guessed that necessarily. Obviously, two good teams. But like you said, just happy that it's here. Now we're going to decide the Valley and a lot of other things as well.
The Dakota marker game is going to be special no matter when it's played, but now that's the regular season finale. The rescheduling kind of does make the game a little bit more special.
I remember when
nice.
That USD game was canceled, we were all like, oh, it's too bad. What if USD ends up with that day open? Can we, doing the chess match? It all really worked out in the end that at that time, USD couldn't reschedule because it left this week open. And like you said, there's a regular season Missouri Valley Conference title on the line. Even maybe bigger than, I know every year the goal is to win the Missouri Valley, but
home field advantage.
Home field advantage, that automatic qualification for the playoffs. You aren't left at the mercy of the committee, which is always kind of just a mad bag.
Who knows who's getting in
that
this
was the
year.
most PC way I could say
you put that very politely, but you never really know what the committee's going to do. And even getting into the playoff picture a little bit, you look at the Valley and you would think some teams might get in, but it's just like, well, based on history, it doesn't really matter what they did, but based on history, we know that's not going to happen.
And it's a weird year in general. That 16 team, the field cut down for a little bit more on this game, on this season, and what it all means. We head down to the rest of our team down on the field. Ryan Gellner, Brian Shawn, and Lee Timmerman.
And I think you guys kind of nailed it. One team is going to leave this in the committee's hands. The other team is going to have home field advantage likely throughout the playoffs. So, guys, I don't know. We've been talking about this the last couple of minutes. Has there ever been a game where this much has played into the final game of the season?
Probably not on the final game, and like Beth kind of played out, we didn't think it would be, but as the spring goes, you go week to week, and here we are. I like the fact that there's more on the line. It always certainly makes games more fun. It's not a secret if you don't know, these two teams don't like each other, and that goes on for quite a while, so you always have that rivalry aspect and that little bit of bitterness that goes when these two teams play to throw that extra fuel on the fire to make today even more fun.
For the first time maybe in history, Brian, it feels like the Dakota marker is almost secondary in this game.
There is, just because of the shrinked playoff field, only 6 at-large teams getting in. Whoever wins this game gets the auto bid, likely has home field, I would think, throughout the entire playoffs. The loser probably still gets maybe a home playoff game, but then has to go on the road. And who knows, with all this regionalization, if they could possibly meet again down the road as well. That's what's so unique about this spring. So yeah, I think it's a good litmus test. We'll find out how rusty South Dakota State is. I think that's going to be the interesting part after a month-long layoff since they've played a football game.
There certainly is more energy down on the field. And of course, the fans for this one, it's a big one, Beth. Not just looking at playoffs, but looking for that Dakota marker as well.
Yeah, guys, the Dakota marker, a huge part on the line here. Looking at the series history between these two in this Dakota marker, a game that's been being played, that's been being celebrated since 2004. NDSU on a 3-game winning streak in that. They lead it all time, 10-6. This game's important.
Yeah, it really is. And if anyone's wondering where that rock came from, was the border between North Dakota and South Dakota. So there's a little Dakota marker history for you. Blue Key, which I was a member of, also was founding members of it. But yeah, it's the
founding
biggest
member, mic drop.
I know.
I wasn't in that group at the time, but I was a member later on. But yeah, it's we look at last year's game, and who could forget what happened down there at SDSU and Brookings. And I remember, I don't like to give Brookings. Yeah, I don't like to give Brookings credit for a lot of things, but that was an unbelievable atmosphere. I think they had more fans than they ever had. College game day was there. I mean, it was, and then we have this 4th down run by Adam Cofield in a game where really South Dakota State, I felt like they had to control a lot of it. NDSU, like like always, seems to always at least finds a way to win.
Seems to always is the key word there.
Absolutely.
Tuska, yes, love that energy, a South Dakota kid, and that's the thing. This is a big game for a lot of different reasons. Take a look at us hoisting that trophy in this one as well. NDSU at that moment to hoist that trophy up. I asked some of the players this week just how much this means to them. I asked Costner Ching, a South Dakota kid who picked rocks in the fields at his dairy farm, if he ever thought a rock would mean this much to him. Let's hear what the players have to say about this moment.
When I first came here, the rock wasn't in that case. And you see it, you walk by it every day, and you see there's no rock in there. And you think about all the past guys that you know, the classes that went out not getting it, the senior classes that went out losing it or not being able to bring it back home. And it being in the locker room, it reminds you that, you know, this week you got to turn it up a little different. You got to practice a little harder. You got to run a little faster. You got to put more work in the weight room. It reminds you that you know, there's a little something behind this week.
Yeah, I mean, you got to we walk by it every single day, and you know, main goal is to go 1-0 for the week, but it is important. It's important to both states. You know, and anybody that's been a Jackrabbit fan or a Bison fan, they all see it as the Dakota marker. You know, that's the one tangible item other than the national championship trophy that you can hold at the end of the game, you know, and call yourself a champion. And this year, you know, I think it's great that we get to play for a Valley championship. And, you know, one of the teams are going to hold the rock, and obviously I hope it's us. But, you know, it's like the same feeling of, you know, getting your bid into the playoffs, getting a Valley win, and you get to, you know, hold something tangible at the end of the game.
Zeb Nolan, Costner Ching there talking about this moment. You had the privilege of hoisting that trophy undefeated in your time in these Dakota marker games.
I thought those guys said it brilliantly. I mean, Costner, it was the same way when I got here. The case was empty, and the rock wasn't there. And as soon as you get it back, it's one of those things you never want to give up. You travel down to Brookings with it. Obviously, you see it in the corner the entire game. And it's just, and then I thought Zeb said it really well, too. It's one of those things, there's no other game like it, where you could actually go grab a trophy after a regular season game and running over. And I think it's even better in Brookings, but running over and grabbing that rock and being able to lift it up, it's, you know, it's second to probably winning a national championship. It's just an unbelievable feeling. And then you see, I think that's 2014 maybe.
That's your senior
my
year.
last year doing it. Yeah, and it's like carrying it off. I mean, it's so heavy. It just feels like the weight of that game you're carrying off the field with you, and it's just an unbelievable feeling. And it's something, and I'm so happy, Beth, Devin, that I never had to see the other team sprint across the field and grab it, because I promise you that's a horrible
that's not
feeling.
A sight you want to see at
No,
all.
absolutely
And then
not.
you're the team that you're the reason why you don't have that in the trophy case for a
And
year.
then you have
so
to look at that empty trophy case for the entire season, and then you put it right in the middle of the locker room the week of. So it's not something you want to see.
Well, like you said, that Dakota marker currently here in Fargo. The Bison own it, and they have owned it the last couple of years. A live look at it. We'll send you to break with that look. I'd like to look at the other side, actually. I know Kyle's very passionate about not showing those SD initials. That'll do it for us in this first segment of the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. We'll be back with plenty more. Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. SDSU, the Jackrabbits making their way into their locker room here inside the Fargo Dome today. NDSU, SDSU, always a huge matchup, but SDSU coming in with 3 days shy of an entire month off because of COVID and all of the cancellations and postponements.
Yeah, and it's this thing you could use as an excuse, but NDSU had the same, one less week last week when they played Northern Iowa, so it's just something, you know, in this crazy season that we've had, you're playing in the spring already, it's just another thing you have to deal with, so, I mean, I'm not going to feel sorry for them. But
I'm shocking.
Yeah,
shocking.
Shocking, right?
We saw NDSU against Northern Iowa last week, and it took them a little bit to wake back up.
Yep.
You know, that those weeks off, they're going to be detrimental to any team that has to go through that. So SDSU with even more time off, that's something that's going to be a factor for sure.
As much as you want to replicate a game, too, in practice, and people talk about that all the time, it's not possible.
Nowhere near
I've
the
been
same.
a part of a lot of teams in lot of time out, you can't do it. It's not a thing that's possible. You can't tackle live and take that beating on your body.
And that's why I think NDSU needs to be extremely opportunistic early in this one. You know they're going to have something scripted out. Gosh, if they can get everything firing on all cylinders, really take advantage of a little bit of that rust, it could be game-changing ultimately, because you don't want to let SDSU stick around too long. Our own Ryan Gellner meeting up with the voice of the Jackrabbits today. Let's catch it.
Tyler Merriam is the voice of the Jacks, and Tyler, it's been a long time, March 20th, since the Jacks have played. Maybe question one is, how do you knock the rust off and get ready for a game, not just a game, but a really important game?
I think it's a great question. I think if the coaches had the answer to that, if I had the answer, they'd be picking my brain for it. I think that's one of the biggest keys to this, especially the first couple of drives, because I don't think you can win the game in the first quarter, but you certainly can lose it. So for SDSU to at least withstand the early moments of the game is a big deal, because as the Bison found out last week, when you have that long layoff, the physical nature of it early on is probably the biggest thing to overcome.
Before the nearly month off, the Jacks offense was really good. 3 straight games you had won by a total of 78 points, but able to put points on the board.
Yeah, they've been able to do things a lot of different ways. Mark Granowski able to run the football or throw it from the quarterback position. Multiple running backs able to rack up 100-yard performances. Pierre Strong Jr. is the headliner, but Isaiah Davis, no slouch. Granowski's run for over 100 before. And then a lot of different weapons in the passing game at wide receiver or tight end. So offensively, they feel really good about where they're at. At least they did going in. Now we're going to see after that layoff if they can come back out and show it today.
We talked offense. This game, though, might be about defense. Both teams like to run the ball, so the question is, who could stop the run?
Well, I think it's a great point. I think that and turnovers are the two big things today. Defensively, who can force turnovers and who can not give up those big plays in the running game. We expect it to be a physical game. We know the likes of Lupke and how he's going to be running the football. We know how the Davises of the world can be physically. So if one team can win the line of scrimmage, and we know both offensive lines are good, if one team can really dominate the line, that goes a long way today.
Both of these teams, Tyler, obviously storied histories, great games against each other.
Yeah.
This one, very unique in this year, but there is a ton, maybe as much as there's ever been, on the line today.
The coaches from SDSU haven't said it, but I have to think when you're talking about trying to come off of 4 weeks now between games, the best way to do it is to have this dangling fruit at the end as we do right now, which is the Missouri Valley Football Conference title, the Dakota Marker Trophy, a top 2 seed in the FCS playoffs, we all believe, if not the #1 overall seed. With all these things on the line, how can you have much rust? How can you not be excited for this football game on both sides? So with everything we've dealt with, all the uniqueness of this just feels right. This is a special way to cap off the year. Even if it wasn't the way we intended it to happen, here it is.
Yeah, here we go. Tyler, thank you. Have a wonderful call today.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Take care, bud.
Thanks so much to Tyler and Ryan Gellner there for a look inside the program. Really want to jump in where Tyler left off on the run game, particularly when it comes to SDSU's strength there. I think that's why we're seeing so much strength and stability from Mark Granowski, their freshman quarterback. It's played a huge factor in the success they've had.
And it's a quarterback's, best friend, always. When we say that about Zeb a lot, and there's a reason why NDSU's had a lot of successful quarterbacks here, is because they have such a good running game and a good defense. But I think particularly Pierre Strong, I think he was dinged up a little bit in this time off. You talk about all the disadvantages they might have had. I think one of the big advantages was they get him back healthy. Isaiah Davis, another guy for SDSU that really picked up the slack in Pierre Strong's absence. So this is the strength of their team. When you have a young quarterback, you don't want him to throw the ball a ton, but he's also, and Devin, I know you're a fan of him, he's also shown some good things as well.
Yeah, and that's something that he adds so much to this game is his running ability. He's also running for over 250 yards this season. Yeah. So when you have a quarterback who can be just as part of a run game as the running backs can, and their offensive line is playing lights out when it comes to running game, and when you have this many weeks off, you're going to default back to the inside zones, the bread and butter plays that you do well. So the run game's going to be huge for him.
Well, I think a big defining part of this game that stands out for me is all of the names that are not on the field this year. It's been, truthfully, 100% nothing against the young man. I'm really glad to see Roseboom not out there. I feel like I've been covering that young man
I think he played against when I was playing.
Honestly,
right?
It feels like he was here forever, caused tons of problems for the Bison, including an injury or two.
Yeah.
And so, those are some of those big names. You think about guys who have had Derek Tuska last year here in this game. Some of those names, Adam Cofield, who isn't out there this year, that have had such a huge impact in the last couple of years. I had the chance to talk to some of the players about preparing for this game, and not only fresh faces out there, but also not having fresh film on this team for more than a month now.
It's going to be really exciting, given the fact that, you know, it's going to be new faces on both sides. So this is going to be an exciting game, and it's, you know, the old guys such as like Jabril and Mikey Daniel, you know, they're not around anymore. So it'd be nice to see like who are the new stars coming out in, you know, the Dakota game.
You know, you can go back and watch last year's game, and they don't have Roseboom who can run sideline to sideline like probably no one else in the FCS last year. You know, and that changes the dynamic a little bit. But you got to realize you got Joshua, who plays safety number 3, and then Logan Backus, who plays Sam linebacker. I mean, those guys have played a lot of football for the Jackrabbits, and you know, you can't knock them for that. They play really hard, and you know, those two do a good job of getting everybody lined up and getting them where they need to be each play. And you know, just going out there and be ready for anything. You know, focus on what it's going to take to win the game, and that's taking care of the ball. And you know, my job is to do my job and not the other 10. You know, they're going to take care of me up front, and I'm going to do my best to get us in the best situation.
Love to hear that from Zeb. Asked him what he did in that time off. He said he got away, he got his head right, took some time for himself, and he's been able, we saw it last week, he played well, he played confidently. Wanted to ask you, though, about, you know, we make so much of this rivalry. We make so much of the emotions on both sides. Do you remember those guys? Was there somebody on the offense that you were, on SDSU's offense, that you were always like, I got your number?
Yeah, well, my senior year especially, their tackle, I just kind of could tell. Even watching on film, I just kind of could tell I was going to have a good day that day. But then, you know, he kind of got me the second time. But, yeah, I think that's a big part of these games and playing them so many times. We played South Dakota State twice, 2 years when I was playing, and so you get to know them in the regular season, then you get to find their weaknesses, what they're good at, what they're not good at, how you can take advantage. And, you know, as we see now, there's a lot of new faces, so that's something you're just going to have to adjust to during the game.
Can't get too comfortable knowing who's on the other side, because then this year comes around, you don't know who's over there, and then you're going to get blindsided.
Exactly.
So
there you go. We've got plenty more to come on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. We've got a lot more to talk about with these two quarterbacks as they match up here for the Dakota marker. That's next. Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. A lot of history between these two programs. A little retro football.
that was those were like the prime uniform days too. We were talking about that yesterday, like old school SDSU, NDSU uniforms. Everything looks great.
On the ear? Oh yes, I love it. Love to see it. Oh my goodness. All right, taking a look at our quarterback comparison here. We've got Zeb Nolan on one side and Mark Granowski on the other. The senior veteran, been in lots of programs, seen it all with Zeb Nolan, and the freshman Mark Granowski earning his position here this year. Taking a look at Zeb Nolan's numbers, at his progression through all of this, heard an interesting fact. He leads the nation currently this season in yards per passing.
Interesting.
Those big end of the half giant moments have made the difference for Zeb Nolan, and he, you know, showed some good consistency last week.
Those occasional full sends to Christian Watson, as seen here, like that. Those are the ones that are like increasing that average for sure. And I mean, like the confidence that he has now. We were talking at the beginning of the season, we wanted to see more of this of him, and then we said that for the next few weeks, and then it started to come out, and it's just chunking up more yards. I feel like he's getting more comfortable. Obviously, when we got thrown into this spring season, nobody was comfortable. Nobody knew what was going on. So I think this has just been the natural evolution of Zeb Nolan here.
Well, and so important, you know, you can't forget about the fact that Hunter Lupke has played a huge role, you know, in their ability to be able to make him more comfortable, for him to be able to evaluate the field a little bit more, to have a second, to have some time, and the strength, consistency, and a little bit of experience that offensive line has continued to build up as well, because there's some young pieces on there.
Absolutely, and Matt Eds said that time and time again in press conferences, how basically there were a lot of players thrown into spots where they were trying to find fits. That's never a great situation, but they've really come around as the offensive line goes. Every week has been a progression. We've seen it with the amount of pressures Zeb's been under, the amount of rushing yards they chunked up, the UND game, obviously a standout one there. So just been getting more and more comfortable down in the trenches.
Well, and I think an important thing that it's maybe my concern this week, and my confidence has never been higher in Zeb Nolan, but my concern for him comes directly from SDSU. Their defense is incredibly opportunistic, particularly when it comes to those cornerbacks, those safeties. They're averaging nearly 2 interceptions a game.
Right.
They're causing turnovers. They're wreaking havoc on offense, and with emotions high, that's the only area where I think everything needs to slow down. He needs to take his time. And he said this week he's been working on recognizing and realizing when not to force something,
right,
when to make the smart decision. That's the only area I may be a little bit concerned.
Well, and that's what's coming with the comfort. But that was something that was very noticeable early on. We talked about all the time was Zeb's decision making. And that's something that's come around as we talked about. But like you said, with those defensive backs and what they can do with just disguised coverages, taking advantage of bad throws, that's going to be the difference maker for sure, assuming NDSU doesn't get it done on the ground.
All right, I promised you we would get into Mark Granowski.
Yes. Sorry.
Taking a look at his numbers here.
Look at that. Look at that.
Should I just move aside?
Sorry.
No, I mean, take
Very
it, young man.
impressive freshman year for Mark Granowski, to say the least. He's brought a lot to the table. Look at the rushing yards. That's just as important as the passing yards. It's just another element that he brings. I called him Johnny Manziel earlier this week, and I don't feel like that's too wrong. His ability to make plays. I watched film on him earlier this week. He's making passes while parallel to the ground while getting sandwiched between D linemen.
A lot of that stuff we saw from Trey Lance.
Exactly, yeah, and just the ability to improvise. Look at that. He had a defender completely all over him, still managing to fit the passes in. Granowski's had an amazing freshman campaign. Now, obviously, NDSU's defense, that's where their bread is buttered.
And this is a huge part of it. His ability to run and to physically run those yards after contact. He's not afraid to take that contact, something we've seen a lot from our NDSU quarterbacks.
Exactly. I can't remember the last time I've seen a freshman quarterback, maybe Trey Lance,
I think his name was Trey Lance.
Truck 2 middle linebackers like that on the same play.
Yeah.
So
his name was definitely Trey Lance, but it's fine.
And then there's not a big list after that. It's Lance, Granowski, and then a pretty big gap. So a lot of good factors bringing to the table there at the quarterback position by SDSU.
A young man from Naperville, Illinois.
Represent.
I guess I'll tip my cap on that note and that note alone. We toss it down now to the field. Ryan Gellner, Kyle Emanuel sticking around for a little bit of how it's done.
We often talk, Beth, about the Bison winning the line of scrimmage. So for this week's How It's Done, we bring in Kyle Emanuel to talk about what winning the line of scrimmage means offensively and defensively.
Can I take a pause quick and just address Devin and Beth? Can we get a little less love for the SDSU quarterback? That was a little bit too much for me. I think Granowski's a great player, but he's completing 55% of his passes, so let's not crown him Trey Lance just yet. But now, getting back to the offensive defensive line, I think when you look at the offensive line and winning the trenches, it can mean a lot of different things. The easiest thing, Ryan, is getting movement. Getting the D tackles kind of in the laps of the linebackers and making their fits that much harder. But it can also mean a lot of different things. And maybe if a defensive end's trying to set the edge and you're a tackle and you push the edge wider and you give your running back more room to cut. Maybe it's a double team. Maybe you don't blow the guy off the line of scrimmage, but you just bump him out of your gap, and now you're able to go up to the second level and cover up some guys. And the other thing that you and I talked about is getting low and playing with leverage. You talk about that a lot, and it's kind of a cliche saying, but low man wins. It's a saying for a reason, as I like to say, and that's going to be a key in this game to see which offensive or defensive line can play better.
We're watching some of the offensive linemen work here, and getting low, is it exactly what it sounds like? If I'm lower than you, I've got an advantage?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone, if I went to go push up against you, Ryan, and I'm standing straight up, I have no leverage. I have no power. These are your big muscles down here in your core, and these are the muscles you squat with, right? That's how you win those battles. So I think, but more so, I think it's not. A lot of people talk pad level. Well, you can bend over, and now my pads are low. It's really more about your hip level, being a knee bender, bending your knees, and be able to take advantage of that in a way to win against your opponent.
You obviously played at a high level in this football game. Without looking at the scoreboard, can you tell how you're doing against your man before you ever watch it on tape, before you look at the scoreboard? Can you tell if you're winning by the way you're moving or not moving him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talked about the edge, and I think for me, especially as an edge defender, was more so, am I able to stick him in the run game? Am I able to win more than I lose in the pass game? It's not necessarily always about getting sacks, but am I able to pressure the quarterback? Am I able to disrupt the quarterback as a D tackle? Like I'd say, am I getting moved off the ball? Maybe I don't have the most tackles in the game. Maybe my stats aren't incredible, but am I doing my job to help my team? And that's how you know, really, am I winning or losing this battle in the trenches?
So if you want to watch for something in today's game, watch the offensive line, watch the defensive line, see who's getting pushed, see who's getting leverage, and look at the scoreboard and see how it's done with Kyle Emanuel. The Bison hope to get it done against the Jacks. Game time is about 34 minutes from now. We've got much more to do on the pregame show after this.
Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. Has to be 2011. Warren Holloway, the first man to the rock. Always love to see the first man in. We continue on now with our Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show with the Sanford Orthopedic Sports Medicine Injury Report.
Yeah, on field side along with Bruce Pyatt. And Dr. Pyatt, last week I saw you probably work as hard as you've worked all season. I know you got your steps in at UNI, and for those folks at home that don't know, UNI was very unique last week in that you were dealing with a lot of cramping on the Bison sideline. In fact, had to take a number of players back into the locker room. Take us through that scenario.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if that's not a little bit of the effect of playing here in the spring. You know, we're used to playing in the fall where as the season goes on, it's getting less warm, it's getting less humid, whereas we ran into kind of a buzzsaw down there where on the field there wasn't much air movement that was occurring, and so the humidity was high to begin with, and the athletes really dehydrated pretty quickly, and that led to some of the problems that we've seen.
And so you took a couple of the players to the locker room, some of those over halftime, and started an IV, which you're going to show us here.
Yeah, so this is some of the fluid that we use. This particular fluid that we're using here is lactated ringers, and it's basically just fluid that we can put into the body, but it has some of the electrolytes, sodium, potassium, calcium, things like that in it that you normally find. But I also always want to emphasize that this is, when we're to the point that we're using this, we're in trouble. We're behind the 8 ball, and it's going to be very difficult to solve the problem for the athlete. We really have to solve that problem leading up to that week. If you look at it, when you're hydrating, your body has to be hydrated not just during the game. It's got to be hydrated all week. So we really encourage the athletes to be drinking a high degree of fluids. And kind of a general rule you can use is every day, if you take your body weight, if you're 150 pounds and you divide that in half, you need to every day get at least 75 ounces of fluid in at a minimum. So we encourage them to do that at a minimum, and we can go even above that. And then at the same time, we're hydrating on the day of game. As you know, traveling with the team, you'll see that every time you show up, there's fluids in your seat because we're really encouraging them to drink both water as well as electrolyte drinks.
And so just real quick, you will put this, the amount of that bag, into a person before you put them back onto the field.
Yeah, so as quickly as we can. First, we got to break the cramp. So we do a lot of stretching of the tissue that breaks the muscular spasm that's occurring. And then to try to prevent it from going, from coming on again, if we just give them oral fluid, now we're depending on it going into the stomach, be absorbed into the body, whereas I can put it directly in their vein with this, and that way get directly at the issue of dehydration.
Very interesting stuff. Again, thank you, Doc.
You're very welcome.
Everybody that had cramps last week is in this week. Kobe Johnson remains out with a leg injury, and Phoenix Sproles, although he has been cleared, has announced that he will not participate in the spring for North Dakota State. We will see him back next fall. Let's move into our keys to the football game. Kyle Emanuel will join us in just a second. The boys upstairs will join us as well. And our first key is to stop strong, and that is Pierre Strong, who averages 89.5 yards a game. Lee, Brian, Pierre Strong, he is the key to this football game, and the Bison need to stop him.
Yeah, you can throw that one into the easier said than done category, Ryan, no doubt about that. But one thing Pierre Strong is better than most running backs in the entire country, let alone the Valley. He does a very good job of cutting back at the right time. So if you over-pursue, especially in what the Bison coaches call like a mid-zone scheme, kind of a stretch play that SDSU has used over and over and over again, if you break down your fit on the backside, there he goes. He really can get it done and break big plays on the ground in that department.
And South Dakota State does a nice job of dressing up a lot of their scheme in different ways that almost get your eyes going like this all over the place. You're not sure where the play is going. And this is a guy, as LT said, it doesn't take long for him to find a crease and go.
Wasn't long ago that Kyle Emanuel and I broke down key number 2, and that was the line of scrimmage. But when you look at a game like this, running back that wants to run against running back that wants to run, it's really done right there. Who's better on the line of scrimmage, Kyle? We got to watch that.
Right, and we just talked about it, but I think the biggest thing, and something I mentioned in how it's done, and Lee just mentioned it there, when they like to run the zone scheme. Well, what does zone scheme mean? It means basically all the offensive linemen start running one way, if it's an outside zone, and they want those gaps to run sideways, and that gives your running back a chance to make a cut. So if we really look at the line of scrimmage and what we need to see from NDSU defensively especially, set a hard edge, make those gaps stop, make it easier for your linebackers, make those gaps smaller, and that's something that they're going to have to do. Obviously, there's a lot of other things along the line of scrimmage and coming into the pass game and giving Zeb time and all that, but I think that's a big, in a game when we know both teams want to run, that's going to be a big key.
Our third key to the game is simply finish. It's something North Dakota State has preached all season long, but look at the numbers. NDSU up 63 points when it comes to the first, meaning they're leading their opponents in the first half 98-35, 63 points better. In the second half, the Bison, overall, they trail 84-83. The second half, guys, has to be better. Brian, how do the Bison finish in this one?
Well, I think establishing the ground game always helps, keeping your offense on the field and not having sputtering drives where you allow your opponent maybe to gain some momentum. But the problem with that is South Dakota State has outscored its opponents in the second quarter 59-7 already as well. So yes, finishing is important, but both of these teams have been able to start fast and build leads. Who's going to be able to do that here in the first 2 quarters in this matchup today?
Well, Ryan, when you talk about finishing, what's the ultimate goal? To finish with that ball into the end zone. So when you get inside the 20, it's called the red zone. NDSU's defense has really struggled, which sounds weird. I think the Bison are last actually in red zone defense, so that's one area to look today. If the Jackrabbits are, moving the ball down the field, can the Bison stop them in crunch time in the red zone? They haven't done it very well so far this year.
And interestingly enough, too, guys, North Dakota State, 22 red zone possessions itself offensively, just 12 touchdowns. That's way down at 55% from where they usually are, 85, 80%. A team that usually finishes when they get in there with a strong run game. That's not been the case this spring.
It should be easy, Kyle. You get into the red zone, you need to score. If the other team gets in, they can't score. It's not quite that easy.
Yeah, it really isn't. But, I mean, it is surprising, though, and Lee brings it up, but we've always had a bend but don't break attitude around here at NDSU, and it's been something you pride yourself on. Well, maybe they have stats. Maybe they run the ball a little bit. Maybe they throw the ball around, they get some yards, but we keep them out of the end zone. I think it was Coach Klimas, maybe it's Coach Enz's thing, but, field goals won't beat us. Well, it's kind of turned around a little bit on NDSU this year, and I think the guys make a good point. If you can't win in the red zone on both sides, that's when you might start to struggle, especially getting into that second half when you're trying to run the ball a little bit more, burn some clock. And I think another thing, NDSU needs to get that first drive of the first half, whether it's offense or defense, and I don't know what the stats are exactly, but that's a huge momentum builder for the rest of that half.
Points, right? They need some sort of points.
Points, or if you're on defense, get off the field immediately and let your offense go to work.
Well, we'll watch it from the very beginning of this football game until the very end. The Bison need to start fast, but they need to finish as well. It is the 111th meeting between South Dakota State and North Dakota State. In Bison marker games, the Bison are 10-6, and it's the Jacks' first game since March 20th. Those are all the storylines. It's the Farmers Union Insurance Bison pregame show. It rolls on. Number 2, North Dakota State. Number 4, South Dakota State. 23 minutes from now, right here. We'll be back. The Dakota marker is up for grabs for the 17th time between South Dakota State and North Dakota State. Welcome back live inside the Fargo Dome. That's not all that's on the line today inside the Fargo Dome. This is Herdline News, brought to you by Gate City Bank. It's the 111th meeting between the two schools. Today's game will also crown a Missouri Valley Conference champion. Missouri State and North Dakota already have pieces of that conference championship. They each have one conference loss, but today's winner between the Bison and the Jacks, they will be the third team that shares that conference championship for this season. Even bigger, though, the winner of today's SDSU NDSU football game will receive the auto bid into the playoffs. The entire playoff field is set to march on. Tomorrow we will know who that is. Let's see if the Bison can get wide receiver Christian Watson involved in this game again. The junior earned his first career Missouri Valley Conference Offensive Player of the Week award after gaining 229 all-purpose yards at Northern Iowa, including a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Senior punter Garrett Wagner earned his second Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Week honor after averaging just over 44 yards on 4 punts. Special teams has been just that for the Bison, very special. Here's Matt Entz talking about his special teams moments ago. Coach, special teams has been really good all year. You'll need all the units to play well again today.
Well, it's something we put a lot of time and effort in. Our kids understand it's a huge piece of what we're trying to accomplish every week. Coach Gazer, Coach Morgan, kind of our lead coaches, along with Coach Pauly as well. Those three spearhead the four main groups and do an outstanding job every week. Our kids are buying into it because there's opportunities to make big plays. Our young kids realize that's kind of where they earn their stripes at NDSU and within our program.
Not much difference when it comes to South Dakota State. They want to run the ball. They've got a good one back there. The quarterback can run as well. You have to stop the run today.
Yeah, we're going to have to. I think, Pierre Strong's probably the best running back in the country in FCS for at least what I've seen so far this year and in previous years. And so he does make the offense go. And if they can have stay ahead of the chains, being short third down situations, it's going to make it a long day for us. Quarterback does a really nice job as well.
I assume the Bison want to be the Bison. You'll want to run the football today.
Well, of course we do. I mean, it doesn't matter who we play. We're going to make sure that we try to get our run game going early. We need to utilize our pass game to help our run game be more efficient. If we can get 10 to 12 solid completions that move the chains, I think that's a good day for us.
Matt, with everything that's on the line today, what's your final message to the team when you leave that locker room?
Well, we already started talking about it a little bit. We got to finish. Every team in the country starts the year with the aspirations of being in a championship situation. And because of our perseverance and our passion as a program, we have the opportunity to finish. And not very many people in this world do. And so we're going to take advantage of it.
Look forward to that. We'll see you at halftime.
You bet. Thank you.
Doesn't get much better than the final week coming down between North Dakota State and South Dakota State. Again, so much on the line, the Dakota marker, the conference championship, but maybe most important, home field advantage likely throughout the playoffs, and one of those top seeds in the playoffs. That playoff will be announced tomorrow on ESPN, and we'll see where the Bison and the Jacks, the winner of this game, obviously in. The loser, they wait and they wait and they see where the committee places them. Both teams, though, likely in the playoffs. Kickoff about 15 minutes away from inside the Fargo Dome. About 9,000 fans will be in the dome to watch this one go down between the Jacks and the Bison for the 112th time. Can't wait to bring it to you. The Bison hoping to lift that rock moments from now. It's North Dakota State, South Dakota State, and it's coming your way when the Farmers Union Insurance Bison pregame show rolls on.
Welcome back inside the Fargo Dome. The Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show rolls on. Under 15 minutes to go until we battle for that big thing. 75-pound rock, the Dakota marker in the 17th meeting here in the Division I era. Brian Shawn, Lee Timmerman back with you. And LT, before we get into our Bobcat heavy lifting report, you think about all the great players, but specifically the quarterbacks that have played in those matchups over the last many years. And Taryn Christian is the most recent, and then North Dakota State had Carson Wentz and Easton Stick. You had all these battles. Well, now we're facing guys that have never played in this game before that are playing in it for the first time here, Mark Granowski and Zeb Nolan.
But they also have guys that are on the team that for both sides that have emphasized the importance of this particular matchup. So yeah, it's fresh for them as players, but the tradition of both programs and what the marker means, they certainly know what it's all about.
It has developed into that rivalry, I think both programs and both schools were hoping for when they made this decision to do this back in 2004. And when you look for South Dakota State, before we get in to the Bobcat Heavy Lifting Report with Kyle, Taryn Christian had 41 career starts. It felt like the kid was here forever. You could never get him out of here. Now this is their fourth starting quarterback for the Jacks since the end of the 2018 season. That's kind of been the musical chairs they've dealt with here the last couple of years.
Really, the last time we played this marker game down in Brookings, we were thinking, oh boy, look at Trey Lance and Jabari Gibbs, and these two young kids are going to go at it for a long time. Well, they're both on dramatically different paths with the two new quarterbacks in here, but yeah, and quarterbacks and quarterback run in these particular games has been an important thing over the years with those guys you mentioned. And of course, it started with Brock Jensen back there too, in terms of having the quarterback be productive on the ground.
Trey Lance having his second pro day on Monday.
Yeah.
We believe that a year ago where we would have been at with all this? Well, let's now get into that Bobcat Heavy Lifting Report, and it is going to be Zeb Nolan who is taking over. There's been some ups and downs, but the one thing he did do last week, and Tyler Roll said this is probably the biggest reason we won the game, is he didn't turn the football over.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, I guess you take a look at Zeb's numbers and you got the good news, bad news situation. The bad news is, well, he's only hitting about 1 out of every 2 passes are completed. The good news is, and Beth mentioned it early, when those passes are completed, he's throwing for more yards than anyone else in the country per completion. So, yes, are the numbers good? Is the percentage good? No, it's not. But if you're cranking out almost 15 yards every time someone touches the ball, that's good.
7 minutes to go, less than 7 minutes to go on the Coors Light countdown clock. Kyle, I know quarterbacks are something you're always looking at because they're the guys that have the football in their hands every play. When you're looking at these two guys, what are your thoughts as a former defensive player when you're trying to game plan for them?
Well, I think the first thing, and it's obvious with Granowski, is just his athletic ability and his ability to make plays outside of the pocket. As a defensive guy, that's always tough to do. As you take a look at the Coors Light countdown clock with 6 minutes left, and I just think when they can get outside of the pocket and they can make things happen that necessarily aren't a part of the playbook, that's when it becomes tough. But I like what you mentioned about Zeb, and Zeb has been a little bit hit or miss, but when he is on, he looks good. He's zipping the ball down there. He's making plays and he's getting completions, and that was one of the reasons I want to pick him in this game. South Dakota State's defense is very opportunistic. Beth mentioned it earlier in their interceptions, and I think they're leading the country in interceptions. If he can just take care of the ball, I'm not saying he needs to be the Bobcat heavy lifting player of the game because he needs to throw for 400 yards, but I think he does need to be efficient. He needs to not turn the ball over. And when there is those chances for him to, maybe pick up a big third down or something like that, I think he needs to take advantage of it.
Yeah, Kyle, I don't think we'll be shocked either to see a little bit more of Cam Miller. I know we're talking about Zeb in this particular segment, but as long as we're talking about quarterbacks and we talked about quarterback run game, Cam Miller might get more snaps due to that quarterback run game in this contest against the Jacks today.
The other part of this that we haven't talked a lot about is the familiarity of the coaching staffs with one another, and that is part of the game within the game. These programs know each other so well. They almost know what each team is going to check into based on what the other does offensively. So maybe we're going to see some things that, quite frankly, we have never seen out of either program before.
And that'll be the fun thing to see if we can pick up on some of those keys. But you're right. Jason Eck calls the offensive plays for South Dakota State. David Braun calls the defensive plays for NDSU. Hey, back when one was at Mankato and the other guy was at Winona, they've been doing this for a long time against one another.
And South Dakota State, the one thing they do, as David Braun tells us, they do a really good job of making you play vanilla, getting into your base defense. So we're going to see if NDSU gets a little more aggressive. We've seen David Braun do that this spring.
I thought the best line from our conversation the other day was Coach Braun was talking to us and along with Ryan and said, hey, if I'm not calling pressures, throw something at me. Meaning he wants to blitz and blitz this young kid hard.
Just over 4 minutes to go on the Coors Light countdown clock. The Bison getting set to take the field for the final time here in this regular 2020-2021 season against their rivals from Brookings. The 17th meeting in the D1 era for North Dakota State and South Dakota State. And again, the Bison with that 32-game home winning streak also on the line, the 4th longest in FCS history. Bison picked #1 in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. It would be the 10th consecutive conference crown for North Dakota State. Another thing on the line here today is the Bison have done so well dominating this league over the last decade. South Dakota State would love to have a piece of it. Both of these teams perennial playoff contenders as well. Two and a half minutes to go on the Coors Light countdown clock. And we are getting set for the kickoff between the Jacks and the Bison. And it's coming up next. Stay with us.